All right, everybody. Today, I'm so excited to have on Allison Tepper from Tepper Nutrition. Allison, thanks so much for being on the interview.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Allison, I am very, very interested in talking to you today because I love your approach to nutrition. I love the mindfulness approach. So, just so everybody knows, Allison is a registered dietitian and owner of Tepper Nutrition. It's a nutrition counseling group here in Northern Virginia. They have locations in Leesburg and Alexandria. Allison and her team specialize in intuitive eating with a focus on helping clients reduce their stress around food, break free from dieting cycles, and build a healthier relationship to food and their bodies. Her practice supports clients with various needs, including GI conditions like diabetes, heart disease, sports nutrition, pediatrics, prenatal, postpartum care, and much, much more. So, thanks again for being on, Allison. And I'm really excited to learn more about you and your practice. I love your approach to diet and nutrition. But first, Allison, just maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, how you got into nutrition in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. Excited to chat today. So, Allison Tepper, and yes, I became a dietitian, gosh, many years ago now. I went to school at Syracuse University and getting into nutrition, it was a combination of things, I would say. I think definitely at the forefront was wanting to do something to help people. It was just something I was passionate about in combination with feeling very passionate about food. I just love food, the experience around it, the cultural piece of it. There's just so much to explore and get creative with. And so definitely a big part of my life growing up. But then there was this also like another component of, enjoy food, but don't eat too much of it. And food is meant to be delicious and tasty and part of this cultural experience, but also expectations about looking a certain way. And so I got really curious about kind of like how to navigate food in a way that felt supportive, sustainable, enjoyable, and really diving into more of how to incorporate it in a way that felt safe
Yep.
and to navigate it in this way as well. So that was definitely just a combination of like wanting to help people and enjoyment of food and how do we break free of the noise and the confusion. Definitely like in the 80s and 90s, it was loud then, but gosh, we are dealing with so much more now. So it's definitely a big passion of mine.
So that is interesting. How do you feel like that, since you've been doing it for so long, how do you feel in the 80s and 90s, just the food industry, the diet industry has changed into what you're dealing with now?
Yeah, I think, at the time it was still loud, but it was less available at all times, right? Like I think a lot of I really good the example that I was using like a magazine to get my nutrition information, or like just conversations around it. Whereas now it's just at your fingertips 24/7. It's impossible to ignore. It is just pervasive. So there's that component of it. But I do think now too there is this wave of, there's more people talking about enjoyment around food and intuitive eating. There's more people talking about body neutrality and body acceptance, and that wasn't as prevalent in those times. So there's a mix of both right now. Whereas in the 80s and 90s, it was very much just like dieting trends and fat free, and there's a lot there.
What is your take on the food pyramid and just um, the industry becoming, if you have an opinion on that, just the guidelines, the recommendations by the American Heart Association or the food industry of a whole, how have you seen that change? And are your clients kind of understanding now that, the food pyramid isn't necessarily, accurate? Obviously everyone's an individual case, but how do you educate your clients on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely with the food pyramid, it has evolved over time. And now we have my plate. And I think that, when we're trying to create something that's going to work for everyone nationwide, it's a daunting task. And so
Right.
something together that can speak to maybe most people. And but I think that there's this component when we're looking at these things that we need some additional information around it. We need someone to kind of help guide and then individualize it as well. So I think it's a good starting place, but we need to expand upon it a lot more. Definitely, my plate is something that I use with clients, but different versions of it and really applying it to them individually and using it as a guide to kind of talk through the importance of each food group. Um, but really as like a gentle guide versus like this is really what we're going to be using to utilize our food intake and our time together. So I think that there's room for improvements and individuality around everything, but it's a starting place.
Absolutely. And that's what my clients I know get very frustrated with because every patient is different, just like I'm sure in your practice as well, right? Everyone wants just a cookie cutter approach to everything, but that's why I feel that my patients value an individualized care plan. Similarly with your clients, how can you explain to people how nutrition is different for everybody? There's not just a cookie cutter approach that you can just throw at everybody that's going to get results. What do you guys do differently in your practice with clients that need those individualized needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is usually in my initial call how I describe it to clients is that it's not a one size fits all, which is what a lot of the messaging out there is, like the diet plans and the different programs. And that's just not going to be effective for most people. So in our practice, in that first session, it's an hour long and we're getting such good history. We want to know about your history with food, even from childhood and growing up, the messages and language that was used around food, like what types of foods that you ate growing up. We're really diving deep into the history, the relationship to food, what your day to day looks like, lifestyle preferences, medical conditions, medication use, supplement use. It's just, we're really diving deep, because it's the only way that we can then move forward. Okay, what's going to work for you? What's the plan? How do we put this all into practice in a way that's going to work specifically for you? And we really try to do it in a way that doesn't feel like any restriction or deprivation. How does this work for you today, in 10 years, whether you're at home, whether you're traveling? So it's much more in depth than what we might normally think of when we meet in.
Perfect. And so, do you guys, when you're taking that history, because it sounds very in depth, do you use any objective resources? Do you do any blood work? Do you do any metabolic panels, anything like that when you're doing an intake with a new client?
So we don't do any testing in our practice, but we will use anything that you have done with your other providers and use that to help guide our sessions. And then we are in touch with clients' providers as well. We want that release form to talk to, whether it's the primary care, nurse practitioner, any other medical professionals that we're working with. If they are working with a chiropractor, like we want to be able to be in touch, talk about our approach, talk about the tests that they've gotten done, and how we can utilize that in our practice if it feels like that might be a good step for them moving forward.
Awesome. And then with your, specific approach to the mindfulness around it, which is what I'm really excited to talk about. How did that, if you're willing to share, is that something that you struggled with personally, and that's why you got motivated to bring that into your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a product of like for so many people that go 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 mentality. Um, you know, busy, busy, not stopping to just kind of like tune in to ground, and noting like how that can impact one's approach to food. So if we are eating when we are stressed or really busy, that can impact digestion, that can impact the amount of food that we are consuming. It impacts satisfaction and enjoyment of the meal. There's so many different roles that mindfulness can play when it comes to our food intake, and then also, using food in different ways too. Like I definitely have a history of like emotional eating, and so being able to incorporate that mindfulness, check in with my body, and then being able to help clients do the same. It's just powerful for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm a big nerd on the physiology. I love talking about cortisol because we see it in our practice all the time. Can you touch on how cortisol affects our body and affects, our maybe our emotions or our mindfulness when we are stressed or when, we, I'm sure you have a lot of people that use eating as a stress, reducer. So how does that affect the body when cortisol is pumping through our system?
Yeah, I mean, cortisol, we are in fight or flight, and our digestion turns off, our cravings for more energy dense foods increases. So we definitely see that playing quite a role. Eat food is an easy reach. It's readily available, whether you are, out and about or sitting at your desk at work and feeling stressed. You can just grab something and then it kind of like hits those dopamine sensors quite quickly. And so we can utilize it anywhere in a sense. And when we are in that fight or flight state and when our cortisol is increasing, it kind of sometimes can feel like the only option that people can grab just to really, feel good quickly. That's appropriate in a work environment or something like that. So definitely it plays a huge role. And so we are working towards finding other ways to relax, to tune in, to ground the body. Food, it's going to happen for a lot of people because it does feel good, even though it might be temporarily. But we're also exploring like other ways to take care of yourself in addition to that, that might be more beneficial long term.
So I'm a victim of that. My wife and I try to always pack a healthy snack because I try to work in sprints, and I'm sure some of your clients may be in the same boat where I'm just like I drink way too much coffee, first of all, but then I try to have a healthy snack because I know in the middle of the day when my blood sugar drops, if I've got like a healthy yogurt with some blueberries, raspberries, and some granola, I can really satiate that urge to grab something that's unhealthy. What are some of the unhealthy things that you see your clients go for when they are having those cravings? Those you mentioned energy dense foods. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Yes. And I'd like to share that this is just a biological response. Again, like when we're in fight or flight, we need energy because, in the past, it was kind of like we needed that energy to run away from a threat or an animal or whatever it might be. So it is just biology. I always like to let people know that so that there's like, we can start to decrease any like shame or willpower thoughts around it. And so, what we gravitate towards when we're thinking of energy dense foods are going to be maybe like those higher sugar, higher fat foods that is going to, again, like kind of give you that dopamine hit. You might not have that same effect from eating like carrots or celery sticks or things like that. Are noticing like, wow, I'm really craving this food right now. I am feeling really stressed. That's where some of the mindfulness can play a role. So we can kind of start to tune in like what emotions are coming up and what do you need that will actually help you feel better long term. But yeah, we're mostly gravitating to the good stuff.
That's right. That's right. Um, are there any tips you give your clients to prevent getting to that point where they're just like, oh, I just want like a big piece of pizza or I just want like a big cheeseburger right now? Are there any helpful tips that people can use so that maybe they, prevent from getting to that point where they're just like, oh, I just need to go grab something quick? What kind of advice would you give the people in that situation?
Yeah, so I think it's really like the power in the pause. It can feel like that emotion is coming up, and the next thing we know, we're in the kitchen or we're ordering food. So, can we just take a moment to check in? What is the feeling that is coming up? And giving yourself time to feel it and maybe reflect on it a little bit. Food is used as a way to maybe like ignore a feeling, to soothe, to kind of like push down whatever feeling might be coming up. And so can we give some time to say like, okay, what is this feeling that I'm even noticing? And like, where is it coming up in my body? And a little bit of space for that. And then it's finding, and it's so unique to each person, like what else can you do in those moments that will help you to reduce the stress or to take care of yourself in a way that's going to feel a little bit better long term? Because the food might help momentarily, but oftentimes it's not going to be very long lasting. Feel good, and especially if we're overeating, then it's like, oof, okay, now I actually maybe feel a little worse. And so, what's going to be most beneficial in that time? So maybe it's calling a friend or getting fresh air. The list is it can go on and on. It's just kind of like what's going to speak to you individually. Um, Other examples that clients might do are like maybe cleaning something or keeping their hands busy, knitting or something like that, getting out of like the usual environment. So if someone's like, I get home, I'm stressed, I head into the kitchen. Okay, I get home, I'm stressed, I'm going to take a shower or something like that. But I think another piece of it is just practice. We have to kind of like rebuild those neural pathways. And so knowing like you're going to practice, it's like training a muscle in a sense. And so knowing that it's not going to go as perfectly planned and that's okay, but just keep going.
I like earlier you mentioned the biology of it. How can you explain to our viewers like the biology of what's happening, tying that to the emotional trigger that a client may have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's both in the sense of, we might feel something come on as a threat. Something stressful happens, we get triggered by something, whatever it might be. And then that cortisol increases. And, the other like, stress hormones can increase. And when that happens, again, like we're not used to feeling stress while we're sitting at a desk. We're used to feeling stress and then again like using that cortisol and that fuel to run or like get it out of our systems. And so it's different now, just as we've evolved. It's not about going on a run as soon as we feel that stress. It's like, how do I decrease this and take care of myself in this moment while again, I use work as an example a lot, but like while I'm sitting at my desk, while I'm talking to this person. So we are navigating things in a different way. If that answers that question around like that conversation.
For sure. And so I love your mindfulness approach. Can you explain to our viewers what is mindfulness? And then obviously, how do you guys use that with your clients?
Yeah. So mindfulness is really kind of like being in the present moment without judgment and using your five senses to help you to be in the moment and to ground in the moment. And how we use it in our work is, when you are feeling that stress come up, when there's that desire to eat, okay, can you just notice five things that you see, a couple things that you smell? What can you feel? Just really getting in your body because a lot of the response to stress as it relates to food is because of like a disconnect in the body. So, can we connect a little bit to the body first? So, that's kind of the first way that we use it. The other way is mindfulness as we're eating. A lot of times we can eat mindlessly. People will report, eating while they're standing up or walking or while they're watching TV or sitting at their desk. We're not always paying attention. And so, can we use our five senses as we are eating? And so, we'll do mindful eating sessions with clients where maybe it's like a piece of chocolate and we are noticing the colors, we're hearing the wrapper as we are peeling the wrapper off, really kind of like sitting with the taste of the food, letting it sit on your tongue, and noticing different tastes and textures. And, again, this helps with satisfaction of the food that you're eating. It helps with enjoyment. It allows you to tune into your body to be able to say, like, okay, I feel pretty satisfied. I'm done with this meal, whatever it might be. But I think the most interesting thing that can come up for people is that when they really slow down with something, especially if it's something that they bring in because they're like, I can't have this in my house. I just eat it all the time. And they slow down with it and they're like, I don't even know if I really like this when I slow down with it. And so that can be really interesting too. So it's just a great way to build that awareness.
Absolutely. It's amazing what just slowing down can do for a person because we're always just, like you said, go, 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 go all the time. And then it transforms from your work or from your personal life into your eating habits as well. Is that what you see a lot of?
Absolutely. A lot of times, people will say like, I eat fast, I'm not paying attention. And I will ask like, how's the rest of your life? Fast, I move fast, everything's just fast. And so I think that we can see very clearly sometimes that food is kind of just like it's another piece of a bigger puzzle. It's not the main issue or, thing that people are struggling with. It's just like maybe a symptom sometimes.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel that sometimes people use eating as, yeah, a distraction to cover. It's almost like an addiction, right? Like, do you run into that with your clients where, um, I mean, personally, so my dad is diabetic. I am a firm believer that he is addicted to sugar, and how do you handle that with your clients if it's almost like a thing where, you want them to slow down, but it's almost like, a substance abuse kind of disorder. Do you see that, or is that common?
Yeah, so food addiction is definitely a little controversial in our
Yeah.
in terms of we don't necessarily and like we're learning a lot. The nutrition field is young, we are learning new things every day, but we don't have that research to show that it has that same addictive quality as alcohol, drugs, things like that, technically. At the same time, it can feel addictive to people. And so I give credit to that. It has that same urgency and that same use that people use it to feel better and to again soothe, numb, whatever it might be. So how we, it's multi-layered and it really depends on the person. Sometimes it's just habit, like
Yeah.
we our parents and how many decades they've been eating something, or like their habits around food have been that way for decades. It's a huge shift, and that is like that practice. And so if someone has to like want to practice and want to make those changes in order to see that shift. There can be that emotional component to it too, that sometimes people do the work and know and realize like, okay, there is this emotional component that I need to eat sugar. But sometimes people, it's again like such a habit, they don't really realize that there's an emotional component underneath it. So there's a couple different things that we're kind of seeing. The other big thing is that food and sugar especially can feel addictive if we deprive ourselves of it. So if we are saying like, don't think of an elephant, that's the example. If you say like, don't eat sugar, you're going to want it. It's just the way our brains work. And so we do see that like the more someone deprives themselves, and some kind of like with this pendulum swing, the more someone deprives, the more likely they are to want it and overeat it. So that's a big part of it too, as we're working on the approach. How do we find like this good middle ground so it doesn't feel as urgent when someone wants those types of foods?
And it can be tricky, right? Because it's hitting the same like dopamine receptors and the same triggers in the brain that, sometimes drugs or alcohol does. So I know you treat a lot of complex, symptoms like, IBS, disease related types of therapies. So what are some of the unique challenges you have with treating GI or IBS related conditions?
Yeah, there's a couple things, definitely I think especially as we're talking about, you know, food and nutrition being individualized, we see that definitely when it comes to GI conditions too. I let clients know ahead of time that it is going to be a bit of trial and error because every body is so different and there's so many different things that can lead to GI conditions. So patience and kind of trialing things is definitely a big part of it. When it comes to GI conditions too, there's so many different factors that can play a role. It can be mechanical, it can be genetic, it can be, based on maybe like medication or medical history. Stress can play a very big role when it comes to GI conditions as well. Types of food, timing of food. There's a lot of things that we're exploring, and also outside of food, it's, water, sleep, exercise, those can play a role in GI conditions as well. So this is another example of like we are getting such a full history on someone so that we can tackle it from, a lifestyle approach and then also the food approach. If someone has a specific diagnosis, yes, these are the types of foods that we recommend to help to treat this. And how do we combine that with the habits and the approach to food as well? So there's a lot there.
Yeah. And with the gut and the brain being so connected, do you see that with your clients? Like if you start working on some of their more mindfulness techniques, versus maybe you're just working strictly on their nutrition habits, um, can you see their symptoms improve if say you're just doing mindfulness work and you're just saying, hey, let's slow down, let's just, not even start with the nutrition aspect of it, but just address the mindfulness. Do you see improvements just by addressing one or the other, or is it really a combination of doing both at the same time?
It depends on the person. So, I think when someone's coming in for nutrition, we're probably going to be talking about both regardless. And so people will find definitely a benefit from incorporating both. But we have had a couple clients where they just, the food wasn't making a difference. And so, okay, let's focus more on the mindfulness. And then they noticed improvements there. There are even psychologists now, they're GI psychologists that focus primarily on psychology and gut health because there's such a connection there. So definitely multi-layered. It really depends on the person, but we do see so much and people start to really chew thoroughly when they breathe before eating, when they're in a calmer state. It's pretty powerful for a lot of people, depending on their diagnosis symptoms.
And what are some of the most common misconceptions they have coming to see you? If they're working, they obviously read your website. They know that you have the more intuitive eating and things like that because you are a certified intuitive eating counselor. So, how is that different than mindfulness and things like that?
That's a good question. So yes, mindfulness, as we talked about, is kind of like being in the moment, bringing that awareness, using your five senses, non-judgmental. intuitive eating is really, so it was developed in the 80s by two dietitians, and they created 10 principles of intuitive eating. And what that does is it takes into consideration your body's cues and tuning in, but also then your relationship to food, your relationship to your body, your relationship to movement, and really challenging the status quo when it comes to our diet culture, really challenging maybe some of the ingrained messages that you've heard over the years about expectations around food and body image. So the intuitive eating really dives into the emotional component and just all the other factors that can play a role in one's approach to food.
Okay. All right. Well, I know that you also touch on body acceptance in addition to the mindfulness, which I'm sure is a very large thing to tackle with some clients, right? So, like long term with that, it's almost like you're a counselor in addition to a dietitian, I'm guessing. So, how, long term do you help those patients get over those types of obstacles?
Yeah, it's complex. So much of people's food choices is impacted because of their body image and what they want to look like and expectations around it. So it really, really goes hand in hand. And I just am thrilled when someone wants to come in and work on that and really start to tackle it. So, really, again, we're getting this full understanding of like when you started to notice body image thoughts, when you started to notice your body, expectations that you have around your body, these, again, like ingrained thoughts, ingrained messages, and then how this impacts how you show up in the world, really. Like how does this impact your food intake, of course, and your movement, but also how does this impact daily activities, things that you enjoy doing, things that you maybe don't allow yourself to do because of how you feel in your body. There's so many different pieces to it. It usually goes quite deep, I would say. I think there's sometimes some people who come in and they're like, I didn't ever had to think about my body. And then in my 40s and then 50s, my body changed. And now I'm starting to notice these thoughts and, just some challenges around it. So we definitely get a good handful of those. But I would say the majority are people who it's like almost from birth, of just like conversations in their home, cultural messages. So we really have to dive deep. And then when we're
Yeah.
looking to work on it, it's a combination of, the language that someone uses, how we can kind of start challenging our culture around body image, getting clothes that you feel comfortable in, having support, finding communities that you feel like you can be yourself in, and ways to take care of your body, even if you don't feel good in your body. Like we're just really over time, just like peeling back the layers and making some shifts. And then oftentimes I will, if, especially depending on how impactful it is in one's life, we'll get a therapist on board as well, just to be able to get like a good, well-rounded approach, depending on how much one might need.
Yeah, because I'm imagining people have a lot of trauma around that, if whether it's they were growing up in their childhood, they've got this trauma that they don't even realize could be contributing to their, you know, eating habits, their body image, things like that. So, does that happen often? Do you sometimes need a counselor being like, okay, this is getting so complex, we need to kind of work together with another provider?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as a dietitian, we can help to bring awareness. We can start to, open up the door for that conversation. We can take a look at the history and help people to kind of like connect the dots and see, like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't even realize this is such a normal part of my day. But then I can take a look back and see how far it's gone. But then with a therapist, you're really able to process it and to find the tools and that safe environment to be able to explore the emotions coming up and things like that. So the combination can really be beneficial for a lot of people.
And so doing this type of work, Alice, I know you've got a great team, so I want to touch on that. But how do you and your team when you are uncovering all this trauma, or all these layers of, these habits, it's got to be, I know in my industry, I sometimes it's very energetic, right? It's very emotional. You're constantly just diving into these emotional factors. So in your own, wellness journey, how do you and your team stay, healthy, stay active so that your energy is not always depleted into your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really checking in on how my team is doing. I think just being able to have support within our team and within other colleagues and professionals in the area is such a huge, it's a game changer just to be able to speak to other people who understand and to know that the work that we're doing is challenging. It's so fulfilling, but we know, it's hard work, and so yes, we do have to pay attention to our well-being, and taking care of ourselves. And so, at least just I know for my team, a lot of really active people, and definitely, we have uh, one on our team who's run recent marathons, and another who's a bar instructor, and another does, there's like women's exercise groups where you bring your kids, like she's doing those types of things. So we have a lot of really good activity within our group. And then I think just having the support of one another as well. And I think a big part of what we do for ourselves and our clients is just humanizing ourselves,
Yeah.
goal is not perfection. The goal is to take care of yourself in a way that feels sustainable long term. You're nourishing your body, but in an enjoyable way. And so I think we really practice what we preach in that sense. But it's easy to do when we have a more neutral and flexible approach. So,
Absolutely. And your team's grown over the years because you started, well, how long ago did you start your practice?
we're coming on about 8 years this past month.
Awesome. And so you've grown your team in that time, and obviously, team is at, I feel your team is very, very influential in the impact you can have on your community. And I know that you guys do some community stuff as well. So what types of things do you like to do within the community to really kind of help support and make an impact?
Yeah, I think we jump at any chance to do like any local presentations, workshops. We connect with a lot of the yoga studios in the area because of that mindfulness component. So being able to bring like the food and yoga pieces together. We do some local presentations recently at just different organizations. I've done them at local food markets in the area as well. So really, like if anyone wants to collaborate, I am so here for it because there's so much important messaging to get out. I partnered recently with a local restaurant as well. So just kind of like, utilizing our skills and applying it to so many different avenues where people are open and interested in learning more about food and nutrition. I run a group for a mental health facility in the area as well. So yeah, kind of wherever we can collaborate and meet people and build that community. And it's great. I have such a great community in this area, as you know. So
Yeah, that's great. I so we just had Trader Joe's open up next door and everyone is going bonkers. And then Sprouts opened up. Jasmine had me going over to Sprouts at like 8 o'clock at night. I probably spent $1,000 on groceries this week. So it's been a really big everyone's talking about the Trader Joe's. So I did see on your website that you do partner with local restaurants. So do you partner with those people to make menu specific items that can, obviously be directed towards certain types of diet restrictions and things like that?
yeah, food allergies is definitely a huge thing that we work with. It's a huge passion of mine, and being able to help people to eat in different establishments safely and not have to worry so much about like cross contamination or just possibility of ingesting something. And so that's definitely a big part of what we look at when we're partnering with restaurants, is just making sure that people feel safe when they're eating somewhere as much as possible.
Absolutely. Awesome. So after the initial consultation with your clients, kind of what does the rest of the journey look like for them? Is it weekly check-ins? Do you guys do food prepping? What does that look like for anyone who's interested in, getting in touch with you?
Yeah, so for follow-ups, we offer 50 or 30-minute follow-ups. It really depends on the person and what they're coming in for with the frequency. Weekly, every other week is definitely what we see in the beginning, and then spacing it out from there. And then in terms of the length of time that we work with clients, again, that really depends. We work a lot with eating disorders, and so when we're on their eating disorder recovery, that's going to be more frequently. If someone's coming in for something GI related, maybe we're meeting a little bit more regularly in the beginning and then spacing it out from there. So we really kind of just individualize it again, just based on what people are coming in for. And in those follow up sessions, like we talked about, that initial session, getting a lot of good history. In the follow ups, we're really tweaking things. So our approach, again, is not anything too trendy or restrictive. There's no deprivation. We're really trying to incorporate different ways of eating based on what you've already been doing, in a sense. Like we find that In order for it to be sustainable, we don't want to completely overhaul what you're doing and have you be a completely new food person. That's not going to work long term. So, what are you already doing? And then, how do we make tweaks and make some shifts based off of that so that it feels good, it feels nourishing, but you're also reaching your goals. And then we're building upon that over time. And the length of time that someone comes in, yeah, really depends on their needs. And a lot of times, too, sometimes people will come in with the expectation like, oh, we'll meet for a couple sessions. But then as we're working together, we might uncover some stuff that needs exploration, maybe something emotional around food or body, and then we might continue our journey a little bit longer because of that. So we take it case by case.
Absolutely. So with the accountability aspect, I have a hard enough time keeping my patients accountable and on their frequency of their schedule. In nutrition, I feel like it is so much harder. How do you gently keep your clients accountable, but also, in a way, do you want to keep them on track? We want to, have those uh, calls or those touch-ins, consistently so that they're seeing the results. And then long term, is that something that a lot of your clients are like, hey, thank you so much for your help. I feel like I can do it on my own long term, or do they still need that those accountability check-ins from you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, kind of depends on the person. One way that we definitely see accountability, we use a food logging app as part of our portal, but our app doesn't count anything. It's just to get an idea of what someone eats, how they felt. They can put in any notes just to kind of get a good gauge of, like what was going on. Is there any correlation? And it prompts someone to put their hunger and fullness levels. So we're really getting some good like qualitative information through there, and we can go in and comments and ask questions and things. So that is a useful tool for a lot of people that helps with the accountability. They know that they can reach out to us. We have a chat function on our portal. They can email us if they have questions or concerns. I'm going on this trip. What do you recommend? Things like that. We're here to help with that. And then in terms of longevity, in terms of with our meetings, we have some clients who are like, I feel good. I'll let you know if we need
Yeah.
it. And then we have some clients who, we've been working with for a while and they're doing well, but they're like, let me just check in every 6 months. Let me check in around the holidays. And so then we are always, of course, here for that as well.
I know you get this a lot this time of year, but since you brought up the holidays, I've got to ask. I'm sorry, Allison, but that is, I mean, think about it's a stressful time of year. Our business is the same way. It's funny how after Thanksgiving, everyone on Monday comes in and like, oh, doc, oh, my back, my neck, everything hurts. Oh, my hands are so puffy and stiff. I'm like, well, what did you eat over the weekend, right? So with the holidays coming up, what are some helpful tips that you can recommend to our viewers, whether it's dealing with stressful family members or healthy eating tips? What are kind of some of the advice you have for them?
Yes, good questions. A combination of all the things for sure. Thanksgiving in particular, because that's coming up first. There is this habit that people might have of not eating throughout the day so that they can eat a lot at Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't really know if I've ever seen that work successfully for people. Um, so I definitely first thing recommend to eat regularly throughout the day. Just treat it as a normal day so that you can go into the meal feeling hungry but not so starving, and then be able to make some more rational decisions. There's a likelihood that people will feel overly full even if they do that. So just being gentle with yourself, remembering, okay, this is a couple days out of the entire year. It's not going to make or break anything. So it's kind of like this combination of taking care of yourself and then also being gentle with yourself. Definitely like at Thanksgiving, that experience plating the food, just to have some awareness around it, still getting in that balance of nutrients. So you have your protein, carbohydrate, if there's some vegetable options, just so you can feel satisfied and get in the nutrients that you need for the day. Um, Gentle movement can be really beneficial. Staying hydrated, the alcohol piece of it can definitely play a role as well. We're thinking of stress, like, Thanksgiving and the holiday season is such a joyful time, but it is super high stress. And so people, it's not even just about like the types of foods, but then how we might be using the foods a bit. So yes, stress management and more stress management throughout these times, support if you need it. Definitely just checking in with like, okay, how am I utilizing food this time of year? And are there other healthy ways to cope with things that are coming up? I could keep listing things. It's very, there's a lot of different things that we can kind of consider. But also, too, if someone needs support, knowing that it's out there and people can help you come up with a plan and a different way to approach it. One of my favorite things is when I have a client who, we work together for several years. Maybe that first Thanksgiving and holiday season feels really difficult. And then each year they're kind of reporting it's feeling a little bit better. And I'm like, oh, yes, that feels so good. Just talking about it can be super helpful.
What's the most rewarding aspect of your job? What really motivates you? What really gets you excited when you're working with your clients day to day?
Yeah, there's so much. I think just like those aha moments for clients, if someone's, how I sometimes explain it is that, food can take up a lot of brain space for someone. So when someone shares with me that they were able to, an example, like start a business or do something for themselves that they weren't able to do because they have more brain space to do this thing, that to me is just like, it's so powerful. It's so amazing. I'm just like, yes, that's the best feeling. Um, there's also like, I think just, yeah, those aha moments where someone's just like, gosh, I can't believe how much of my life I've spent worrying about X, Y, or Z, and I'm not feeling that intensity around it anymore. Or if they're able to advocate for themselves, it's like when they maybe going to the doctor's office and just, being weighed is very triggering for a lot of people, and just asking not to be weighed and, feeling like that victory. Like it can be big things, and then it's a lot of like really small things that come up that just are so awesome. I think I had a client recently who was just like, I don't feel like I'm doing the work. Like I don't know if I am. This comes up a lot. People are like, I'm not doing the work. And then they'll realize like, oh my gosh, no, like I haven't done X, Y, or Z in months, and then it's just like taking that moment to really celebrate it. So um, there's a lot of different things, but I think it's just those aha moments, those little nudges, something that, felt like a dream at once that they're actually able to incorporate now just feels awesome.
And that's what I feel like in general, people want to see these drastic changes, but it's really about just reminding them of those little wins each day or each week, and then therefore they can see the progress from day one to day 90. Um, that's definitely something that I think we try to. It's hard, but we try to do it here. Um, Pain is a big motivator for our clients, but with you, you mentioned the scale. A lot of times patients are frustrated because the scale number doesn't look so what types of little wins do you try to show your clients so that they can see that they're making progress when, we don't want them to always look at the scale and use that as a barometer?
Yeah, so definitely we are looking at things like, of course, symptom management. You mentioned pain, and for us, like the GI symptoms, that's a huge one. That too, and like when someone's saying that their symptoms are gone, I'm just like, best. I'm sure you have that same experience as well. Energy levels are a big part of what we're looking at. Lab values, we'll take that into consideration instead of the number on the scale. How they're feeling in their body, like strength wise, that can be a really big motivator for people. They're just moving their body a little bit differently. And so they're noticing that difference in how they show up in the day to day. Reduce stress around food and body image is a big, motivator for people, and definitely a big way that we're kind of like measuring success. So definitely depends on the person and what they're coming in with. But I would say for our emotional component, like look at how people are feeling. And then of course, if they're coming in for a certain disease state, seeing those numbers change and, finding progress there.
That's great. What's coming up in the future for you, Allison? What are your goals? You guys have been in practice for 8 years. What's next on the horizon?
Yeah, so we host retreats. And so I have my next retreat coming next April, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be in Lovettsville. I usually host a retreat about once or twice a year just to kind of like bring women together to explore their relationship with food, find another way of approaching food. I partner with a local Reiki master who does energy and breathwork sessions. So really excited. Definitely just continuing to partner with local organizations to, help bring some more awareness around food and nutrition. So, retreats, keep doing what we're doing, hopefully helping more people. Keep going, I think.
I love that you incorporate Reiki. That can be a whole nother podcast. I love Reiki during the holidays. That's like the best thing for me. Um, so that's great. What if people want to get in touch with you, Allison, how can they what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so our website is teppernutrition.com. On there is a contact form. We have our email and phone number on there, and so people can find us that way. Or, go on Instagram, you can message us on there. Our username is Tepper Nutrition. Yeah, we're excited. We're here to help.
Awesome. Well, guys, everybody, please check out Allison Tepper at Tepper Nutrition. So you guys are in Ashburn and in Alexandria, or Leesburg and Alexandria?
We're
Okay.
gonna, and then we work virtually, many different states, but in our surrounding ones, DC, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, you got to go check them out. The holidays is upon us. So stay stress free, eat healthy, and thanks so much for being on, Allison. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.